time, isn't it?
It's time.
6:05.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so we're live. Good evening. It is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. And it is 6:05 p.m. And I'd like to welcome everyone and call to order to the regular meeting of the Millwood City Council for January. Ms. Castles, could you please do a roll call?
Yes, be happy to. Councilmember Stravens.
Is excused this evening.
Thank you.
He is ill.
Councilmember Sander.
Here.
Councilmember Van Hees.
Here.
Councilmember Culler.
Present.
Councilmember Beasley. And Mayor Freeman.
Present.
Excellent.
So we have a quorum of 4 members present and can conduct business. And so at this time, I'd like to, it's 25, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. So at this time, that brings us to item number 3, approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Is there any member of the council that wishes to make any changes to tonight's agenda as presented? Not seeing or hearing any. Do I have a motion on tonight's agenda as presented?
I'll move approval of tonight's agenda as presented.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, tonight's agenda is passed unanimously. That brings us to number 4, our local agency reports and presentations. First up, tonight we have our Spokane Valley Fire District quarterly report from Chief Frank Soto. Mr. Soto, Chief Soto, please.
If you don't mind, sirs, would you be okay if I have our community's
Please.
community risk reduction specialist, Ms. Caroline Kusher?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, and thanks for the opportunity to read the CRR, or Community Risk Reduction Proclamation, and for your adoption of the proclamation. Whereas every 23 seconds, a fire department in the United States responds to a fire somewhere in the nation, and whereas fires nationally were responsible for 3,670 civilian deaths, and 79% of those fatalities in 2023 occurred in the home, and whereas fires nationally were responsible for 13,350 civilian injuries, and 77% of these injuries in 2023 were also related to fires in the home. And whereas an estimated $23.2 billion in property damage nationally occurred as a result of fire in 2023, and whereas wildland-urban interface, or WUI, related fires remain a concern nationwide with multi-billion-dollar losses as a result in 2023. And whereas the fire service responds to a growing number of medical calls for service, surpassing 80% of total call volumes in some jurisdictions, and whereas community risk reduction is a data-informed process to identify and prioritize local risks, followed by integrated and strategic investment of resources to reduce the recurrence and impact, and whereas the value of community support from local, state, and national partners to address community risks is recognized to meet the demands on paid, combination, and volunteer members of the fire service. And whereas the goal of community risk reduction is to reduce the occurrence and impact of emergency events for both community members and emergency responders through deliberate action in the areas of the 5 E's of education, engineering, enforcement, emergency response, and economic incentive. And whereas most fire-related and many medical calls for service are preventable, with the 5 E's performed as part of an integrated community risk reduction program, and whereas Monday, January 20th, 2025, is Martin Luther King Day and is nationally recognized as a National Day of Service and an opportunity for communities to reduce the risks in their community through a series of educational and other programs. Therefore, be it resolved that the week of January 20th, 2025 through January 26th, 2025 be resolved as CRR Week, a grassroots initiative of fire service professionals across the nation to raise awareness of the importance of community risk reduction in the fire service community and an opportunity to make communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, council members and other elected officials, and to our citizens as well. My name is Fire Chief Frank Soto, and I will be presenting our fourth quarter report to you. Next page, please. So this first part of the report, I'm going to cover the total calls for Spokane Valley Fire Department, and then at that point, we'll switch over to just Millwood. So for the month of December, we had 2,031 total calls. And you can see that the bulk of them, or roughly 84%, were for EMS, emergency medical services calls. Next slide, please. For the month, this is our heat map. The larger the circle are where the most calls are, specifically the orange ones, all the way down to the blue dots are the least amount of calls. And you can see the city of Millwood up there, up on the upper left. Total calls for the year, we were at 24,199. Again, no major changes from the amount of each calls. Roughly 82% again is EMS, which is really our number one. And as a nationwide, it's a number one call for fire departments today. Next slide, please. So this is the heat map for the entire year. And you can see that obviously there's a significant amount of calls in the Opportunity neighborhood and all the way up into this area here in Millwood. Next slide, please. This is a call-to-call breakdown regarding each unit. In addition, the top number is total responses for the month for December, and to the right of that, 30,039 is the total responses for the year. So for the 24,199 calls, it required 30,000 plus responses. For the month of December, Engine 1 was our busiest engine. However, we had 6 engine companies, well, technically 7 if you count Engine 5 at 199, that were right at 100 or above. And then for the year, Valley Engine 7, there goes our guys right there. So I love it when we can bring in the sound effects. Engine 7 was the busiest, and not by much, only by 8 calls, followed by Engine 1, Engine 8, and Ladder 10. So we had 4 units roughly at 3,000 calls or more for the year. Next slide, please. This is calls generated by area. And you'll see Station 2 is 6 overall, roughly 9.3% of the calls came about here in Millwood. Total calls for the year, you'll see not much of a change, still in the same location, roughly 9.21 calls. Next slide, please. This is our auto aid mutual aid page. So you can see the top is total responses where Valley Fire went into another district. We had 35 with the city of Spokane, 19 with D8, 17 with D9, and 1 with Airway Heights Fire. For our help, for auto aid helping us in our areas and or mutual aid, we had D8 respond in our area 57 times, City of Spokane 40 times, and D9 9 times. Next slide. So this is the overall picture for the entire year, with also a good look at the last 5 years to have in comparison. So overall, this is the second busiest amount of calls for the month of December, but more importantly, we finished 4.6% ahead of last year's call volume. So again, this year, or this past year at 24,199, that's the most calls we've ever run on. So it was a busy year. I don't know, things have been going up, and obviously in 2023, things went a little bit down, but they're back up. So next slide. So now we'll be covering the city of Millwood.
Oh,
Oh, there it is, yep. Next slide, please. Okay, so for last quarter, October, November, December, we had 84 calls. You will see that 82% were for EMS, 5 fires, 4 building alarms, 3 motor vehicle accidents, 1 service call, 1 vehicle fire, and then 1 significantly auto versus pedestrian call. Next slide, please. Total responses. So those 84 calls required 99 responses from our units, and obviously the bulk of these calls were covered by Station 2 with 30 of them for the month, and then for the year, 61 of those calls were covered by Engine 2. Next slide, please. So for the fourth quarter, the last 5 years of fourth quarter, we were again at 84 calls, so our third busiest fourth quarter that we've had. And then overall, we finished with 358 calls for the year, which, when the numbers are smaller, obviously the impacts are greater. So we did finish 11.5% ahead of last year's call volume and our busiest year thus far in the city of Millwood. Any questions?
You've been busy. Again.
Not me, sir. The men and women on the front lines, our firefighters, they've been incredible. No complaints, no nothing, just pride, joy, being humble, and serving our community. So they did a great job.
Any questions for Chief Soto? Chief, thank you very much. We appreciate everything SVFD does, and thank you and you and your men and women, great service. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we move on out of the local agency reports and presentations, I'd like to take just a brief minute, kind of at the mayor's discretion. And Deputy Ball, do you mind being introduced? So what I would like to do at this time is I would like to introduce Deputy Trevor Ball. This is the Millwood assigned deputy. Deputy Ball has been on the job about a week now.
14 days.
14 days, 2 weeks now. And so we are extremely fortunate. We have become our own district within Spokane County Sheriff's Office. So Deputy is here 2 days on, 2 days off from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So he works kind of a floating schedule through the week. And we will have, or at least that's what I was told, was that?
Oh, no. It's a very complicated schedule.
But we will have the opportunity to work with him and point out areas that we as the city believe, but he will be here and he is committed to the city of Millwood. So we are grateful to have you here, and thank you and Sheriff's Office for working with us on this. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So thank you for allowing me to take that time. I guess that would go under other presentations. So at this time, we're at item number 6, which is public comments concerning action items. We received one written comment from Doug Sadler, and have we received any other comments regarding action items this evening? So what you have in your packet is what we have received. Mr. Wirtz, do we need an executive session this evening?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and so that brings us to our action items for this evening. Tonight, for our action items for first reading, 8A is the Welch Comer Water System Capital Improvement Plan Task Order. This was included in the 2025 budget, and this is to begin the water system, the capital plan for the water system with the updates that we need to do in order to go chasing after state funding from either the drinking water fund, the revolving fund, or from the Public Works Trust. So At the next meeting, we would ask that, approval sooner than later is better because this needs to be done and finalized, in order for Welch to go have their technical team meetings, prior to the, I believe it's July filing deadlines for both of these, funds, for both, submitting projects for both of these funds. Cause not until we see what we get, if anything, from any of the funding agencies, can we begin to contemplate whatever else we would need to do. So are there any questions on either of those items, or on that item? Anything there? This would come back to you at the next meeting. I would say that if we're not at the next meeting, if we can't, at the next regular meeting, if there are more questions and you can't get approval or need more answers at that time, gonna have to have a special meeting, because we've gotta get some way to get it. If we're gonna go forward with it, we gotta get it done so they can get cut loose and get moving.
Mayor, if there's any clarifying questions between the meetings so we can just optimize, is that directed towards you?
Let's just, or bring it either to me or to Lisa, staff. Actually, just send them to staff.
Okay,
That would be better.
thank you.
Any other questions on that? All right. So that concludes our action items for first reading. This brings us to our action items for consideration. First is our consent agenda, consisting of the December 2024 regular meeting minutes, the 2024 Joint City Council Planning Commission special meeting minutes, the December 2024 Treasurers Report, the December 2024 Claims and Payroll, the CRR Week Proclamation for 2025, our hearing examiner interlocal agreement with City of Spokane, and our City of Spokane purchasing and procurement agreement. Would any member of the council like to take any of those items separately? Seeing or hearing none, do I have a motion on the consent agenda as presented?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none opposed, tonight's consent agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Item B, 9B, is our 2025 STA ex officio board member appointment. At this time, I would say that I think our typical protocol is to ask Councilmember Sander, our current sitting STA member, if he would like to continue in that role.
Yes, I would. We're just wrapping up our strategic plan, which has been a major effort the last year and a half. So, and now we're gonna be looking, getting a new CEO. Right now, we've got two CEOs, both the directors of the operations and also planning and development. So they're sharing that at this point. So far, so good on that. So would like to continue for another year.
Is there any other member of the council that would like to toss their name out for that role? So we have Mr. Sander
I'd
and.
like to make a motion to nominate Dan Sander for the role.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's your chance.
Abstain.
You don't have to abstain.
Conflict of interest there.
Hey, you voted for yourself. Hopefully you voted for yourself when you ran. You can vote for yourself now. We do have one other point of business on this. We have been asked by STA if there is anyone who would wish to serve as an alternate from City of Millwood for Mr. Sander if Mr. Sander can't make those meetings.
I would sit as an alternate.
Sit as an alternate. Anyone else?
When are the meetings?
I'm on also the Planning and Development Committee. That's usually the first Wednesday of the month. And the STA board meeting is the third Thursday of the month. except there's an exception coming up.
I think I have a
forgot what
conflict
month, but
Yeah, I think I have a conflict on Thursday, so.
Yeah, I can get them.
Sure.
I'll make a motion to nominate Andy as the alternate.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of Mr. Van Hees being our alternate? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none opposed, Mr. Van Hees will be, his name will be communicated to STA as our alternate who would attend if Mr. Zander cannot. Thank you very much. So that brings us to, item 9C, which is our resolution 2501, the city employment VIBA. This was brought forth at the last, brought forth as first reading for the last one. This is just reauthorizing the city's VIBA plan for 2025. Any questions on that? Do I have a motion on resolution 2025-01?
I make a motion to approve resolution 2501, the Viva.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then hearing none opposed, resolution 2025-01 is passed unanimously. Thank you. So this brings us to resolution 2025-02, our sewer and water rate resolution. And what we do not have at this time in the packet is the rates. The city just completed doing that analysis today, and so what I'd like to do is walk you through quickly the city's analysis, and what I would say is at this time, because my treasurer is not here, what I like to do is just run through these rates, see if there's any questions, and then move this for consideration at the February meeting. But fair warning, should the treasurer determine that we need to address this earlier, we would reach out for a special meeting for consideration of just the water rate portion, or just the water rate ordinance. So, you received a packet of some spreadsheets, and so the first few are just a rehash of what was presented during the December meeting. This is just a rehash of what the what our 2025 water fund budget is for our fixed or operating costs, for our variable or consumption costs. The total of those two, both of our fixed cost and our variable costs, or our operating and consumption costs, and such as our total budgeted costs for 2025 for the water fund, which is $412,130. Next slide, please. Next page. So this is just a rehash of the number of services or units we have in the city of Millwood. We have 768 residential services or units. Our commercial on the premises is 118. We have a couple of commercial irrigation lines, and then we have 10 public irrigation lines for a total of 898 services of various meter sizes. Next page, please. So currently in our operating costs, because our goal is to analyze our rates by both our fixed or operating costs and our variable consumption costs. Currently, right now, our rates are set at our residential base rate is $24.65, and then we have 1 inch. Then we have meter sizes for both commercial and public irrigation, and those base rates or those operating rates change by meter size. So you can look through there. On average, on a monthly basis for 898 units, we are able to we capture almost $23,000 a month in income for operation or for operating costs. Right now, with our budget being about $23,800, we fall about $821 short. That, however, does not build any sort of reserve for operational costs. So that is literally we have 821.74 to break even. So could you go to the next slide? This is the biggest slide we have here, and this is an analysis of the operating cost income. And I want to credit Mr. Sander for doing a lot of work in looking at the multipliers, the meter multipliers, because the American Water Works Association recommends that you increase your base rates increase dependent upon the size of the meter, and they have come up with a number of meter factor multipliers. Mr. Sander was kind enough to supply that. And so what we did was I looked at what we have currently, which is on the far left there, and then looked at a few scenarios, because you can play with a lot of different scenarios of what we could do in ways of charging both increasing the base rate itself, which is our $24.65, or charging a surcharge, if you will, based on the meter multiplier set forth by the American Water Works Association. And so Dan did a number of analysis looking at different types of scenarios for adjusting meter size. Three of them I've kind of cannibalized from what Dan put down and presented three scenarios. The first is looking at a 2% increase, use it to the base rate, which would take our base rate from $24.65 to $25.14 on a monthly basis, and then charging 100% of the AWWA multiplier per meter size. So the AWWA multiplier is a 1.0, a 2.0, a 3.2 for a 2-inch meter, a 6.4 multiplier for a 3-inch meter, and a 10 multiplier, or I'm sorry, a 6.4 for a 3-inch meter and a 10 multiplier for a 4-inch meter. So we increased the basis, looked at the change, looked at the revenues, and at 100% multiplier with only a 2% increase, it basically delivers an extra $415 a month. But what you might notice down there is for those larger size meters, it really makes a significant increase in the amount of monthly charge. So for that 4-inch public irrigation meter, that rate would go from $113.60 a month to $251.43 a month. So we looked at, then the next one is a 5% increase to the base rate at 80% of the AWWA multipliers. And so that yields a little more total at the bottom, but still has some skew in the what we're charging out for the very largest meters at the bottom. Still at the end, what we've done is we've taken the base rate from $24.65 to $25.88, which is a change of $1.23 a month. That would add $1.23 a month to just our standard residential. The last scenario is something that City is proposing, which is a 5% increase to the base at what we're terming a Millwood multiplier, which is to take the AWWA and scale that a little more consistent with what we have previously charged, but still with the intent of delivering the revenue that we need to deliver. And so what you see there is that basically the difference is that we set our meter multipliers for a 1.0 for a 1-inch meter, 1.6 multiplier for a 1.5-inch meter, a 2.6 multiplier for a 2-inch meter, a 3.6 multiplier for a 3-inch meter, and a 4.6 multiplier for a 4-inch meter. This causes varying levels of increase in the monthly overall charge, but doesn't put anything too far out of whack. If you notice, what we get is like for a 3-inch meter, or let's say a 2-inch commercial meter, we were originally at 5430. Now we go to 6729 at a 2.6 multiplier. That's an increase of $12.99 a month. But if you look at some of the other ones, it would be, if we went with 100% of the AWWA, that would go to $80.46 a month, or $66.26 a month. But we still, at the bottom line, are kind of consistent operationally with delivering more revenue and covering what is needed for the monthly budget. So these, right now, I would say the city is recommending the 5% at the modified multiplier. I would be interested in Mr. Sanders' comments on that, or anyone from the council, but I think that mitigates a lot of the change that would be distributed amongst the higher or larger meters, and we don't really have a lot of them. So you're basically going to single out just a few individuals with a pretty big whack. So that's kind of for the operating costs on that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are our operating rates. So this is just to summarize the current operating rate. What we have in 24 currently, what we are proposing, or what's being proposed, which is the base rate based off the modified AWWA multiplier, the relative or the monthly increases that you see, and overall annual increases, and then what somebody would be paying on an annual basis for fixed operating costs. So basically for the large majority of our users, you're looking at somewhere between a monthly increase of $1.23 and $1.93 a month, which is a mitigated increase from where we were originally proposing to do this, but still realizes the amount of revenue we need. Next slide, please. So operating costs. This is just a total of what the income would be. Can we go on to the next slide? The council can digest it. So variable consumption costs. This is what caused us the most consternation the last time. Credit to Councilmember Vesey for realizing and noting that we were burden shifting. And the intent was to gather 5 years worth of data for consumption by unit by month. So we could do an analysis of tiers as what does monthly consumption look like per unit per month. As always, when you turn over a rock, you find things underneath. And what we found at this point is that we have two different programs. We have a program known as Master Meter, Meter Master. Master Meter. Master Meter is what is used to get the telemetry from the meters, the direct meter reading. Master Meter goes with the little unit, goes out, talks to all the meters, beams the data back. The data Master Meter makes a file. That file is then taken to our accounting program called Springbrook. Now what happens with that file is it just gets overwritten the next month. And we don't keep that file. We don't archive that file reading. The main reason why we don't archive it is we are not required to archive raw data as part of the Records Retention Act. So Master Meter simply works on that basis and writes over it. But the data still lives. It gets loaded into Springbrook, and that Springbrook is what generates our invoices. There are few ways to query data right now out of Springbrook. It is not possible, the way Springbrook is set up right now, for us to do a data dump from the information that is in Springbrook, where we can export from the Springbrook data to a file where we have monthly consumption by unit for a given year. We are meeting with Springbrook to figure out how to be able to get that data. We can export every month. We can go to a unit, a given residence. You can go to my house, the billing number, and you can dump out January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November into a PDF file. It won't let you export it to a CSV, it won't let you export it to Word or anything. And you can do that for every account, every unit we have right now with Springbrook. So we have 1 year of data, which Mr. Hecox here in our office actually typed in an entire year's worth of data for 866 accounts by hand, so we could have a look at what was going on. Now, what you find is that sometimes the data needs to be scrubbed because some months you didn't get a reading, and then you got a reading and you went back and redated it. And so there are data issues in the files, things like that. So, but there's currently no good way to get the data that in a format, to get the data first of all, and to be able to look at it in the way that was, Ms. Beasy asked for, which legitimate request. So we need to do that. In the meantime, to mull this over, because I have no idea how long that's gonna take, because we're at the mercy of Springbrook to figure out what we can do. This has proposed a variable consumption based on, I have scaled back my endeavor to try and generate a elegant tier rate based on a bunch of wild ass guesses. So what you look at here is 2024 is we have tiered consumption of 0 to, and we'll just look at residential right now because that's kind of carries through. 0 to 1600 CF cubic feet is 32 cents per 100 cubic feet. 1600 to 4000 is 40 cents. Greater than 4000 is 48. What we're proposing right now as a placeholder is, based on our analysis of good data that we have, our base consumption that we're using to set that first tier is too high. 1600 is way high. Our typical wintertime base consumption is about 600 CFS per unit if you look at the average and everything like that. So what you see proposed is that our first tier dips down to 900 CF, 900 cubic feet, with a small increase, 3 cent increase per 100 cubic feet. Then we have we'll call it a interjected tier of 900 to 1800 cubic feet, and that goes to 40 cents, which kind of stays consistent with the tier 2 in some respects. Our tier 3 is 180 to 3600 cubic feet. And now we have a new tier of greater than 3600 cubic feet for those users that are using a significant amount of water during the summer. Are they putting it to beneficial use as we've discussed? Yes, if they are watering their lawn or if they're growing vegetables or anything like that. But we still need to provide that water, and we still need to generate enough income to pay our costs, our variable or our consumption costs, for delivering that water to the system. And I think the more you use, the more burden you place on the system. So this is for consideration for next month, that while we figure out how to actually generate the data correctly, we look at, and always be interested in comments from council. We look at scaling back some of that. What I can say in this is that where we had some of that burden shifting to the lower end, we don't have burden shifting to the lower end as in that pronounced manner. People are going to be paying more from that 900 to 1600 band, but that is because that's a consumption cost that technically we're not capturing. And as we know, we're not generating the income we need to begin to create reserves. We also need to account for increasing electrical costs. And as we all have seen lately, Avista just got another rate increase. So we will have to take that burden of that rate increase on when that goes through and is promulgated out into their ratepayers. So those are variable consumption costs, or variable costs or consumption costs continue to go up. They continue to increase and will increase for the foreseeable future. So so on to the next slide.
Can I ask a
Oh,
question?
sure, go ahead,
On the
please.
consumption irrigation, it seems to have taken a big jump from where the cap was originally.
That's me, that's bad, that's a miscopy, I apologize.
So that should be 22,000.
Yes, it should be 22.
Okay,
Yes, they should have all stayed, basically for the irrigation, I left the tiers alone. That
Okay.
is an error.
okay, I just wanted to call that
No,
out.
you
And
are
then-
absolutely.
And then second question, what happens, how do we recoup costs for that 16 to 23% of water that just, we have no idea where it's going? There's just it's just written off as a loss?
We produce it, we pump it, and we pay for the pumping costs, and so yes, that is why the city comes and says, we need to replace this leaky cast iron
Absolutely.
pipe. So yes, basically, we all pay for it. We pay for our system's inefficiencies. And so by upgrading and modernizing our system when we can, that reduces our system's inefficiencies, and so that drives down our consumption costs. Basically, what I'm hoping is at the end of the day, we generate enough data that we as a council can talk about. There are some programs out there that allow us to do rate modeling and things like that, where we can do a deeper dive on a rate model. North Kootenai does this, a lot of other water districts.
Whitworth, Stevens, PUD, a lot of them actually do it on an annual basis.
And it would probably be easy to do on an annual basis if we could get the data we needed.
Yeah.
So that, by doing that, the city could then model and calculate variable costs, and maybe some years you don't need to raise your variable rate costs because you are doing just fine and you just need to look at something else. Something's changed. You have more efficiency. You're using less water, so you're not using as much power, things like that. So you're not having to do those sorts of activities.
Well, and depending on what that loss is, and we've seen different numbers, I think that's easier for even the public to respect some capital improvements while we're increasing your rate. If there's an actual potential for, hey, next year when we reassess, we might be recouping this many gallons due to inefficiencies.
And cutting our electric bills, because that is a big one, because we're spinning the pump to supply the water, and so there will be rates to be paid for that.
Can I ask, Chris,
Yes.
what numbers did you find that were?
He must have copied and
Yes.
pasted this here instead of copy and pasting this here.
Oh, so 72 should be 22.
Yeah, I
Yes.
just want to double
Okay.
check.
Yeah, no,
I didn't keep up with you.
absolutely. Yes. And so lastly, if we go on the last one is our capital improvement fees. So this is actually what will begin to increase and develop our capital fund. we have written into the budget that we are taking a $1 capital improvement fee to begin to build some level of capital reserve. And so basically by looking at this, what I am proposing is that our base capital improvement fee, we were at $5, we're going to $6, that's a $1 increase. And then we just propagate that down to our other services based on the meter multiplier that we have established in our fixed costs. So if you have a 1.5 meter, instead of paying $1, you're paying $1.60. If you have a 2-inch meter, you're going $2.6, so you pay $2.56. A 3-inch meter, you're going $2.6 or $3.60. A 4-inch meter, you're going $4.60. And so that's what you're paying in because that's your demand on the service. So that is the proposal for setting the capital improvement rates for a base capital improvement fee. The increase is a base of $1. And so if you look on the last page, last 2 pages, what I have given for your consideration at this time is a proposed 2025 rate schedule to consider, which is an operating, which for residential service would be an operating rate of $25.88 a month for base, and a capital improvement rate, capital improvement fund contribution of $6 for a total base rate of $31.88. And then our consumption tiers are down there for, we do have one public irrigation, private irrigation line, so we don't really consider that, but there's the tiers. So 0 to 900 cubic feet is 35 cents per 100 cubic feet, 900 to 1800 is 38, 1800 to 36 is 48. And again, another error, that greater than 3600 should be 50 cents per 100 cubic feet, not 40. That's a bad one on my part. And then same way down at the operational, so you can see for operations, the base rate is $25.88 for a 1-inch meter. Run down through that, our capital improvement fund, our capital improvement fees for 1-inch, 1.5-inch, 2, 3, 4-inch for total base rates of $31.88 for a 1-inch meter commercial, going on up to $128.66 for a 4-inch. And then on the last slide is the consumption for that same consumption. I managed to get 50 cents in there the right way. And we see 0 to 2200, and at the bottom for that consumption, it should be 7200, not 7500 CF. We're not changing any of the irrigation, but we're not proposing to change any of the irrigation consumption tiers as have been previously set. So that is what is tendered out to the council for their consideration. As said, if you have questions or wish to get further information on data, what data we have, I'd be happy to supply that. I will confer with the treasurer if we're good with looking at for this for full consideration at the next meeting. We can do that. If not, we'll be reaching out for a special meeting to consider this if we need to earlier. Questions?
And if I can just confirm my understanding for that bottom tier, that 0 to 900 CF, nothing is changing other than we are increasing the capital contribution by $1, correct? Because the rate still stays the same, doesn't it?
So we are, so that lowest tier, we are increasing, we are at 32 cents and we're going to we're going to 35 cents. So that's a 3 cent per 100 cubic foot increase. And we're doing that across the board. We're doing that for all the tiers.
So for the bottom tier, it's up 3 cents per
100 cubic foot.
100 cubic foot.
Plus the $1 for the capital improvement fee.
And then the next tier, because it used to be the cutoff was 0 to 1600, and now it's from 900 to 1800. Instead of a 3 cent escalation, it's now a 5 cent.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that we're not.
That is correct. Other questions? Mr. Culler?
So the biggest increase was on the 2-inch meter connections. Were we just undercharging compared to what the WA multiplier was?
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody here remembers how we set those multipliers back when we looked through that, or how Welch-Comer set those, or what. I think Welch-Comer gave some suggestions, and then we took those suggestions and then started looking at them based on what we were raising the charges from where we started before, because at that point, we moved from a bunch of flat rates to actually looking at consumption. So yes, we were undercharging because I think we had adjusted different rates to kind of move from there.
And that's not unusual. I mean, it's becoming more aware that those meters put a big demand, have the potential of putting a big demand on our system. And for us, we've only got we've got the pumping capacity, and we have a lot of capacity per well. But for some systems that don't have that capacity per well, that extra demand means turning another pump on, or two smaller pumps to meet that little extra demand. So, and oftentimes, no, I shouldn't say oftentimes, it's not unusual for somebody to get started with a larger meter than they really need. It goes just the opposite for some residentials, especially those with larger lots. I think if they get by with a smaller meter, then they're all upset because they don't have the pressure. Well, you're trying to get a lot more water through a smaller hole, and it's going to take more energy. But we don't have that issue. It's really particular if you've got some hillsides that people want to build at the top of the hill and they want to have a 2 or 3 story building and wonder why you don't have the pressure at the 3rd floor shower.
I have a bridge topic that's kind of between the two, and if it's somewhere else on the agenda, I've just never seen it. But last time we were talking about both water rates and then the wholesale, which is the next item, I said I felt like we needed some kind of communication that goes out in our water bill to explain why, yes, we're talking about this one thing, but we're also probably going to hit you with a raising of your rates. And Dan did what I thought was the most beautiful, as a data person, those tables were so gorgeous. I thought he did the best one page that I've ever seen. I understand we want to refine it a little bit before we send it out, but where are we at from your perspective on that?
So I think what we want to do on this one is once we have an idea of the water and sewer rates and what the council has determined on that, we do want to get some information out on what is exactly going on. If we are, regarding the wholesale water service, that's the next topic that and I mean, if there's any other questions on resolution 2502, we can continue. Otherwise, I would just say we're continuing 2502 to the next meeting. Yeah, we will table it and continue resolution 2025-02 to the next meeting. So regarding ordinance, does anybody have any objection to that?
No, do we need a motion to table that?
Probably should. Yeah, just
Make
reflect
a
the
motion to
motion.
table resolution 2025-02
I second.
regarding the water rates.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none?
Aye.
Thank you. So that brings us to 2025, or not 2025, ordinance 545, which is the wholesale water service. And I think kind of where I am with where I am, and I think our attorney, our utilities manager, our engineer is with this is, before we move forward with any sort of communication about wholesale water service, really what I'd like to get tonight is a sense from the council of, is this something that as a city and as a council, you even want to continue or do? Because there's no sense in sending a bunch of information out regarding we are looking at wholesaling water if there's no desire to pass the ordinance that says we are open to wholesaling water. What I will say is that ordinance 545 The only thing it accomplishes, and I'll ask legal to correct me if I'm wrong, is it simply says that the city of Millwood will wholesale water,
May.
or may wholesale water, thank
Then we
you.
have a procedure to,
There's authority to do it.
There's
and
a-
the procedure is it's coming back to you in an agreement with the terms contained therein.
So any sort of wholesale activity would then have to be conducted under an agreement contract between us and whatever entity was desirous of receiving that wholesale water. This doesn't put any other constraints on the city other than simply the city proclaiming that we may wholesale water to other purveyors from our system. If we are not desirous of making that proclamation, then we should just let it go. Because I don't wanna put a bunch of stuff out there. I'm more than happy to put stuff out there and says, this is what wholesaling water is, this is what it isn't, this is what this allows us to do, we have to negotiate these fees. There appears to be some confusion as to who would pay what, that all has to be negotiated. For the most part, anybody wanting the water would have to pay the burden of being able to receive the water from our system. You're gonna, because we have in the past, let's use Urban. They operate at a higher pressure than we do. So it would be, the way it stands right now, it'd be impossible for us to put water into their system under their pressure. Urban would have to pay for a booster station, they would have to pay for the delivery line, they'd have to pay for the backflow prevention, they'd have to pay for transmission lines, they'd have to pay for all that. We'd have to have an agreement on what's the power cost, you're gonna have to pay that as part of what you're paying us for the consumption of the water product itself, all that. That would all be in contract. And if any time the city was like, no, we're not doing that, you just don't agree to do it. But the only way that the city can begin to determine if those discussions would ever take place is to have that proclamation. Have that ordinance that said, yes, we may sell you water. We may wholesale you water. But any of the other financial constraints, engineering constraints, all those sorts of things, those would be in a negotiated contract later. So I'm not asking, I think at this time, whilst I would like to see if council would consider and take up ordinance 545, I would like at least some sort of consensus or some sort of idea from the council on if this is something that they do want to see. Right now, the wholesale ordinance is in final form. And so that would not change at all substantially, anything, there's nothing in there that
Nothing to
would.
change, no, it essentially, as the legislative body, we're asking you from a policy direction, do you wanna codify that the city may pursue these, come back to you in an agreement, or if you don't want to, we'll cease that effort.
so I hear what you're saying, and here's the struggle I'm having, is that we're dealing with all these, like, they're separate little projects. Like the water rates isn't tied into the wholesale, or like that's not tied into the inefficiencies of our potential system. When one of the reasons why I'm bringing up Dan's analysis again is he showed, at least, and please correct me if I misinterpreted one of the tables, that our highest utilization month, which is July, we lose just as much water a year as the city uses in the highest level, the highest month of all the year. So that's a significant amount of water that's unaccounted for. So to me, you've brought up a really significant issue. We've got to address some fundamental infrastructure stuff. And please, any one of the staff, correct me if I'm wrong, when you guys talked to us earlier about how, you know, there's inflation, so the water's costing more, we gotta increase the rate. I went to Debbie and I asked, well, I get an itemization, like what is driving the inflation? Is it the electric cost? And it turns out, yes, in fact, there is a fuel increase and stuff, or electric, you know, an increase to run our pumps and stuff. But the biggest line item was actually labor costs, tracking down leakages, according to what I interpreted I saw on that cost. And please, if I wish Debbie was here because she's the one that had the conversation with me. So to me, there's clearly a loss issue that we have to address. So I'm open to the wholesale, but I don't think that should be the only thing on the table. I think we need to really think outside the box, and I don't want to interpret like, yes, we're greenlighting this as, oh, we're for sure gonna do this. I kind of feel like if the infrastructure is that big of an issue, we need to look at, I feel like we're being asked to like make a decision about this, like it's separate from all these other things. Can you please push back?
Well, I guess it is separate because you have water rates to operate the system. You have the rates to operate the system. Then you have the we'll call them issues with the system. Right now we have a significant amount of cast iron pipe that is potentially driving a lot of leakage. Do we know for certain it's leaking? I mean, we estimate it's leaking. It's a good place. We've had cast
I
iron.
don't really know until it shows up, but it's a big break.
But we've had a significant amount of breaks lately from cast iron. Our cast iron is beginning to fail, so we know that. So we have system issues that we have to deal with that are infrastructure-based, material-based, and that takes capital money to do that. So we have ways to raise capital money. We raise it either through rates or we raise it through sales by expanding our sales. As we've discussed, one of the issues we have in Millwood is we are sales constrained. There is we add a limited amount of services every year. Sometimes we go down in services. So we are not adding services because we are no longer expanding the reach of our system. So one way to increase our sales is by wholesaling water to other purveyors. That will also generate capital.
So, and to that end, I was at a conference and I was drinking this bottle of water that was given to us by the farmers, and I found out this farm owned the water company. Now, this is all speculation, but from the tenor is what I think is going on is they have water rights that they're trying to perfect so that they can defend it. And so they just started a kind of for loss water company so that they can increase their infrastructure and they can, you're strongly reacting.
I'm reacting because I hope that they're not taking their irrigation water right and using that as a.
Like I said, I didn't talk to anybody. I was drinking a bottle of water at a conference and I'm doing a lot of speculating.
So I can say right now that in the Yakima Valley, there are some issues down there. And one of the things is that regardless of the type of water system you have, a public water system, either public Group A system or Group B, your right, the right that you have needs to reflect the purpose of the water, the purpose the use that you're putting the water to. And so we are having discussions with certain users down there where we are saying it doesn't matter if you are able to demonstrate that you have a Group A or Group B system that meets the Department of Health requirements. Your water right from ecology does not allow you to be a Group A or Group B water system. You have a permit exempt well, or you have a domestic well, and you are not supposed to be doing that. So somebody like that, yes, they are being entrepreneurial in spirit, and maybe they're doing this as a small batch and it doesn't really matter. But if somebody's out there in Odessa and they've decided
I
they're
don't
gonna,
know that this was a Washington State
company or farm.
I
I would just say that for Washington State, if you're out there in Odessa and you set up the Dasani plant on your farm, somebody's gonna come and be upset.
Fair. So can I finish though what I was saying?
Sure,
Because
please.
we're not a farm and we're not doing that. But we actually have citizens. So I was thinking, is there a way that we could start bottling water to escalate? I mean, does it have to be wholesale rights? And just let me finish. Wholesale rights, could there be retail thing? And I did ask, and perhaps we would have to set up a separate entity for that. But also that would increase our capacity for, say, like the month that our water was out. Wouldn't it be amazing if we just had a store of bottled water from our own, you know, that we could actually disseminate to all of our citizens and such? And I'm not, this is an incomplete idea because every time I've tried to have the conversation, it's very clear we're not supposed to have, so I'm having it a public record now. But,
I think there are
I guess I'm asking, is this the only option? I mean, is there other options that we might explore?
I would say that as a municipality with municipal water rights, you as the municipality are restricted to only providing municipal water. Now, if you could have, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think as a
I'm not
municipal.
wading into this conversation. No, I'm joking. There is, your right is set up and it's designated on how you can use it. So as a public agency, you have a municipal water right that allows you to be a public water source, a purveyor of water. Haven't explored the idea of whether you could expand that right and use it in a commercial context, so to speak. There's gonna be to the extent it could, there's gotta be a significant layer of cost and regulatory process to get there. But I think go back to the initial part of the discussion on wholesale water that kind of sparked it was, you got a book of water rights this big, and you've got a state agency that continually talks about, you know, I'm not using the right terms, Dan, and forgive me, but clawing back unused water rights, inchoate water rights, right? This is one of those options that if the city's policy is to at least codify or pursue wholesaling water, you are achieving a couple different things. The first primary of which was, for the mayor, was how do we preserve those inchoate water rights? How do we not lose those rights because we can't landlocked? There's no other ways to do it. Well, there are neighboring jurisdictions that need that water. So then the second purpose of this is the city's got system improvements that will come at extreme costs. So wholesaling allows you to receive revenue to offset some of those system improvement costs as well. So that's kind of the process there in terms of how do you that first step of how do you satisfy that inchoate water right issue. We don't get there on the bottling side, and I don't know if there's other options other than finding a way to put that municipal water right to use for a municipal water purpose. And it's gonna have to be some other water's purveyor using that water. So that's kind of what drove the initial thought. Are there other options? I don't know, because it really started with how do we not lose what the city has gained as water rights on the books for decades? That was kind of the first driver.
I think that, if we were to have a new business in town, be it Pepsi bottling facility or Valley bottled water or whatever, that would, and buying water from the city would be perfect. I mean, that's part of municipal business.
If there was another property owner or consumer of water that came to the city, that's why you're trying to preserve those inchoate water rights. You just, there are processes that ecology can use coming in down the line that says, you're not using them, we're gonna claw them back and we gotta put them to use elsewhere. Trying to find a way to preserve those and maintain those water rights. So if Pepsi or Dasani or whoever comes in and says, you know, you guys have the best water, some of the best water in the nation. We wanna use that water. Perfect. If we don't preserve them, there's a risk there, that's all.
I would agree, we have to find a way to use the water. That's not, but I guess the problem I'm trying to solve is how do we do it knowing that once we sign some of these things, we may never get them back, and what if we need them sometime? Is there a way that?
What? We're not signing
You're not
away
giving
water.
away-
I know we're not selling the water rights, we're wholesaling our water, but if we go enter into a thing with whomever, it's my understanding, especially once you start talking about you have to build the infrastructure to get it to you and such, there's gonna be a term to that, right?
It'll be a term, but it will have to be a definite term, and it's gonna be even couched within your ordinance. If there is a water need for the city exercises its water right and it interrupts the agreement. Those are gonna be terms of the agreement.
And then the other is people have been, I wasn't actually advocating for us selling water to Dasani and Nestle, so just make that clear. But cities have been contacted. How do we ensure that when we wholesale our water to someone else, they're not availing themselves to, I mean, is that gonna be
prohibited
built,
under your
it will be, okay.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
prohibited under your.
I'm just asking questions.
No, but that's an express term in the that's been an express term since day one.
The city has priority.
There's no resale of your wholesale water.
Okay.
They're going to use it for municipal water purposes for their customers, irrigation, domestic use. But the reselling of wholesale water, the wholesaling of wholesaling water, is that wholesale squared? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's prohibited under your ordinance. And that, to the extent that would occur, that's it. That's not gonna be allowed by the state to begin with.
But to your question, could Irvin allow construction of a Nestle bottling plant in Irvin and somehow our water ends up in that Nestle bottling plant? Absolutely. The issue being that the city of Millwood, we would, if we had more land or more open space or more industrial or more commercial, we would be strictly able to also advocate for placing a commercial or industrial property such as a Nestle bottling plant in our location. We don't have that. What we have is a lot of residences, and we have one large industry and a few other things, and so we, as Mr. Ware said, we either find some way to put the water to beneficial use, which an avenue that exists for a municipality is to wholesale water.
Or use it yourself.
Or use it ourselves.
Yeah.
We have limited ability to use the water on a scale that we have, of the right we have, because we don't have those types of zoned properties available for continued development. And so we are what we are. Millwood is Millwood, I guess, is the way it goes. So we have a few limited options in what we can do with our right. I will say that everybody that I have talked to that has anything either municipal or legal or private otherwise ensures that at some point in the very near future, maybe not 5 years, but within a decade horizon, ecology will come looking to claim those rights back as unappropriated and place them back. Where they go, we won't have any say.
So I feel like I've said multiple times, just my stance is, yes, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Yes, I'm not against wholesaling it. I agree with everything you're saying. We need to find a way to use the water. My only avocation that apparently is being perceived as like I'm pushing back on the wholesale is I think all creative options should be on the table, and that we should be free to ask questions to explore those creative options, because I'm going to tell you, my strong disposition is if we have unused water, it's got to benefit the Millwood residents first, and only if it can't benefit Millwood residents somehow, would I love to then explore these other things? So that was always my stance. I'm not against this water wholesale.
Mr. Cullen.
So our user base is plateaued. We have 898 connections. We have, I don't know, we're leaking what? 1 out of every 5 gallons pumped goes back into the ground. We're all paying for that through our electric bill, through the inflation, we have to raise rates every year. How wholesaling water helps Millwood is we add connections virtually through another jurisdiction. So unless we want to burden our citizens with $2.5 million in iron pipe replacement project on top of annually increasing water rates, we need to look at wholesaling water. And that's not even taking into account that ecology will come for those water rates.
Or any other option.
Or any other option. I'm not saying that's the
Yeah.
option.
Nobody's discounting
But
the option.
that's
Arguing against the wholesaling.
wholesaling water does help the citizens of Millwood because it could end up lowering our costs and help fund the infrastructure that we need to repair in our own system.
Exactly.
I think the thing is that if there are opportunities for us to supply water to something, some entity, some business, some process, some development within the city that we can serve it directly from our system, that would be fantastic. I personally can't envision that because I can't get my hands around where something like that would be constructed, where it would be where there's developable land because as you're saying, Sean, we have plateaued in our connections and in our consumption. We're not really continuing to increase consumption, are we? I mean, it bounces around depending upon the season, but our annual consumption line is not just continuing to trend up. And so people aren't using more water. I mean, I guess we could have everybody dig a swimming pool fund.
Yeah, I mean, we could leave
I
our.
don't want one.
It's not you don't want one, it's you get a swimming pool.
Yeah, but.
Here's your swimming pool. But there's interesting or novel ideas to increase our own sales from our own utility are always welcome and would always be championed first. In the meantime, this is an opportunity to be a wholesale provider of water is an opportunity that we could have. That's why this is here. The rest of those sorts of opportunities come about through our zoning and development and building codes and things like that. I mean, maybe something is talk to IEP and see if they would want to use part of their land for, segregate off some of their land for an industrial park or something like that. That would allow places to come in and build more industrial, build more large commercial. Because we're kind of out of large commercial, large industrial land within the city.
Your only capacity, I mean, if we kind of talked through some of the legislative requirements, comp planning through the legislature last year, there's definitely a push, a legal push, not just a policy push, but a legal push also to start increasing multifamily housing options or accessory dwelling units, things like that. You're not going to get significant capacity demand based on going from a single family residence to duplex or maybe affordable. You'll see some, but you're not going to see that big demand that you'd have with a larger commercial development or something or industrial development that needs to be used. I will just say I had the occasion to be out at the City of Airway Heights Council meeting last night for a client purpose, and they're having the complete opposite discussion, right?
Yeah.
It's it's good to be in this situation as opposed to where they're at, right? And I'm not trying to diffuse the discussion other than we have a luxurious problem. And trying to figure out how to put that problem to use for the city. No one solution, just a solution that the city and, you know, staff, council, everyone can continue to work on and think about options.
Back to Shauna's thing though, wholesaling might not even, we have so many water rights, we'll probably have to find other solutions.
Great. Yeah, because if all this is to convince me of something I said, I agree with 20 minutes ago. I mean,
No,
I
I'm just
agree with
saying-
the wholesale. I just want us to open up I think we just need to
How does that
expand
look?
our thinking.
With what we need to sustain and what we have, is it,
It's a huge gap.
is, so
Yeah,
urban,
it's
let's say,
So we-
wouldn't take that
So let's just talk in round numbers. We have 4,000 acre feet of right.
So I've it all written down now.
Yeah, we have about 4,000 acre feet of right.
660 something.
Yeah, if we put if on the highest consumption year, I think we used 800 acre feet.
Oh.
So we literally have 3,000 acre feet available on an annual basis.
Yeah.
Available. You could build another Millwood on top of Millwood, and we would only use 50% of our right. And so that's kind of where we're at. We could take this and just add a whole nother one on. We'd still be good and right, and we'd still have 2,000 acre feet a year left to
Yeah.
do something else with.
So we're not potentially wholesaling everything out, leaving us with.
No.
There's,
You know, it's interesting that the history of the water rights, everybody thought in ecology for years, didn't make any recommendations, they just reacted. Every time somebody drilled a well, they get a new water right, and they didn't have to do that. The existing water right was large enough to have more than one hole in the ground. They just need to tell them, hey, we're gonna take another one, and, but that was happening since, well, before ecology time. It was back in the 60s. They drill a hole, we've gotta have a water right. No, you didn't have to have a water right, but they did, and ecology didn't, oh, okay, stamped it, and away you go.
Well, I think
Right?
science hadn't caught up with, or the regulatory process hadn't caught up with the scientific and geological and earth basis, right? I mean, that's pretty typical. Law is way slow.
We still argue over sustainable yield. We still in the hydrogeology profession argue over what is the sustainable yield of an aquifer. And we're still not, we're not getting any better about it. And we've been doing modeling and basin projections and all that stuff for years. And we'll still, you put 5 hydrogeologists in there and 5 different answers of what sustainable yield is.
Well, and that's why you see the delay on the adjudications. is
Well, I
the-
would like
the
to-
policy side.
Ask staff to move forward with what it would look like wholesaling water.
So I guess my thought is, what it would, if we have the wholesale, if we have the ordinance that says wholesale, then we could move forward with bringing back concrete
Right.
proposals of what the wholesale will look like, because we have some level of, there is interest in the wholesaling, but there's some type of, there is, unless we are literally like, yeah, we've done our side of the thing, we have individuals or other districts that don't want to engage in that, because then you are literally starting down the path of spending money on lawyers and consultants to start to do that. So I guess what I would say is, in talking to individuals from other districts, other purveyors, Millwood needs to look like we have skin in the game, and the easiest way to deliver that skin in the game is to have the wholesaling ordinance. if the wholesaling ordinance is uncomfortable to council, then we'll just let it go.
Yeah, I think in terms of trying to see what it looks like, there really isn't, there's nothing to do until there's an action on the ordinance. We don't have a basis to move forward on some sort of legal basis to even come back to you with proposals or what it looks like.
Yeah, cause we can't ask Matt to engage in discussions because we don't really have any ordinance like.
No legal authority.
You can't dangle the carrot.
I think we should move forward on the ordinance and perhaps have a second read next time.
Okay, so the ordinance will not change substantially, but it will come back at next meeting for the intent for council to consider it and either approve it or decline it. Yes.
I have a couple of detailed questions, but.
Yeah, I have a detailed question.
What?
Need a motion to table it, cause you got it for.
Okay, so can I get a motion? Would
Yes.
council be kind enough to provide a motion to table this?
Motion to table ordinance 545 wholesale of water service.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion?
I have a detailed question, cause, sorry.
Well, let's just table it first. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so tabled. So, detailed questions. Is this something you want to ask in public session, or do you want to provide the questions back to myself and Matt, and and Brian, and we can answer those questions?
I just so is there any way to put into the ordinance, you said, well, if they have a business, or if we give the water to a municipality and then Nestle moves into their municipality, they could start bottling that water. Is there any way, I'm asking a detailed question, is there any way to prevent that? And I can accept if there is none, but I wanna have asked the question.
Section 8, resale of water, that's gonna be in your ordinance. It's prohibited.
But
But I don't think I think that's a purveyor to purveyor, isn't it?
Yes,
Not a user.
To
Exactly.
prohibit the receiver, the buyer, the wholesalee.
Yeah, but I don't. Okay, so that is a question that I guess would require some more thought, because I think I'm of one mindset and I think legal counsel is of another mindset.
so I agree with the spirit as you are interpreting it, and that is what I would like to vote on. But I also see there's an opening for how the mayor just interpreted it, because I had questions. Can it be interpreted that they can sell it? Not that they're going to set up a municipal water thing, but if they have land big enough and Dasani wants to move in with them, why wouldn't we sell it to them just as a commercial person, just like any other commercial person?
It'd be just like, no, okay, wholesaling by them prohibited, but what's the difference to the city in terms of who the customer is, the ultimate end receiver of the customer? If you're wholesaling a quantity of water, what does it matter to the city if it's residential, commercial, mix of residential, commercial, industrial? I mean, you're selling a quantity of wholesale water to them.
And the realistic part of that is that we are in a unique position because we not only control our utility, but we control the land use. Many of these other purveyors around, they don't have a choice as to who they serve. The city of Spokane Valley permits a commercial use or an industrial use or residential use, and that purveyor has to deliver water because that use is within their district. But the permitting's handled by.
Yeah, but here's what I would envision in the city's agreement is there would be a provision in there that would say, so it's pretty typical for any sort of water purveyor to require a new account, a new connection to get, it's called a will serve letter, or some sort of guarantee that there's water service there so they can go further and be permitted and build and do all that. If, we could explore provisions in the agreement that would say there's going to be a potential user of whatever quantity we want to think, something that might have a material impact or materially increase. We're signing off on the will serve. We have to sign off as well. it may prohibit development in that other jurisdictional, that the water boundaries, but we can certainly explore that. I'm not saying they agree to it, which means maybe you have a shorter term period on a wholesale agreement. Maybe it's for planning purposes, you've got planning periods of 5-10 years, whatever it is. But it's not uncommon. They would have to give assurances that there would be water sufficient to serve that development. If that water is the byproduct of Millwood, then we can consult with Millwood's appropriate. And we're totally spitballing here off the cuff in the middle of a public meeting, which is cardinal sin number one.
I'm sorry,
But there's-
but I mean,
yeah.
there was a detailed question and you kind of elucidated that it's to be determined.
It can be. I think at the end of the day, if you're selling a quantity of water to them, I'm not, and let's say they use 200, say they use, the quantity's 500 and they're using 200 and then they get a new user that takes up another 100. That's just more revenue coming back to the city with water that you're not otherwise using in the first place. But, I mean, the more water that you can wholesale and that you're not using, it meets all of the reasons for going down this path of the revenue generation and putting the water to use.
It turns out to be more of a land use question.
Hmm.
We could protest the city of Spokane Valley approving something,
Yeah.
because hey, we don't like that particular entity or that particular use, or because it's going to use more of our, it's going to. We're already saying you use up so much water. That's going to be part of the contract. How much and how you're going to use it. It's going to be more of a land use thing too.
Well, I understood your answer to be it probably will not be addressed in the wholesale water agreement, but there's some things that we can do in the brokering of the deal. And so I guess I'll save it for that time. But to me, if somebody is bottling our water, I feel like if it's at all in our negotiating power, that bottled water should be able to be used for our citizens in any event that our tower goes offline and people are being forced to purchase for a month, retail water. And I exist in a world that, contracts are negotiable. So it's okay to throw things up again, throw things out there to see if it's reasonable.
Everything's determined.
Exactly.
To go forward. We don't have an agreement yet. We don't have a basis to have an agreement
But
yet.
it seems like we're moving forward, so I just wanted to get my,
But today, we already have an agreement with them for emergency water. We could open
Yes.
3 interties and still provide water to our citizens without a tank, without a pump.
Dan had some points.
Questions?
Pardon?
You had some questions?
I think they're just some editorial
Okay.
comments.
Okay.
Nothing major here. Because I did have a concern about not reselling, because there are some utilities that are not adjacent, which you may have to wheel water through an adjacent ones to get there. And I think that we should keep our options open there. Because again, we've got so damn much water, and the more water we sell, the better off we can be.
Alright, so any other questions, discussions regarding or relevant to ordinance 545? So at this time, I would ask for a brief recess for about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Agenda for whatever reason. Have the attachments to it, so.
Didn't have the full packet.
Which is kind of weird.
A dinner.
So,
Were they bottling in plastic or were they bottling in cans?
well, now I don't even want to identify them at all and stuff.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm a little gun shy now.
But I just got kind of
we didn't
messed up
turn
on
the
my
recording
timing.
off. We
It
just
is
left
still
it.
recording.
Yeah, we just left
Because
it.
I have to start a whole new meeting, and
Nice.
And I
That's
can't
a lot.
overemphasize, I don't even know that they were a Washington entity. it just got my thinking going.
Yeah, it was, it's a very different environment out at Airway Heights and it was a great meeting. I took this client engagement knowing that Airway Heights is the adverse party. I don't represent clients against municipalities, but the client said, I have no desire to sue, I have no desire for litigation, I just need assistance figuring out and understanding their city code and how it works. Great. It's kind of cool to sit at a city council meeting as a member of the public and kind of watch it how it unfold. It was a very different meeting. It was cool, but yeah, they're in a very different situation on the water side than.
And that's important to share that perspective too, so thank you.
Yeah, it was a good experience. Yeah.
How much longer do I have? I said 3 minutes. Okay. Reconvening. So, that closes out our action items for this evening, and that brings us to our reports. Our treasurer, Ms. Matkin, is not feeling well this evening. I can say that she has been busy opening up 2025. We have a couple special projects that we're going to try and finish up. One is a city policy and procedure manual, not for employees, but for codifying our internal policies in one place so they are not spread throughout resolutions and ordinances and things like that. So purchasing, procurement, kind of have all that sort of stuff. So she's begun working on that. She's finished a few last things with the auditor, and that is kind of where we're standing at right now. Any questions for me that I can relate to Ms. Mackin? All right, so that brings us to Clerk, Public Records and Code Enforcement, Ms. Castles.
And no public records currently, and, but many code enforcement. I'm amazed at how many code enforcement there are for this time of year. It's normally slow, and I'm just absolutely amazed. So, there you go. That's all I got.
Questions?
Can I just piggyback on the code enforcement side? Just as something we've reported. City staff went out in December, visited the property at 10423 East Trent Avenue. That's been an item of code enforcement focus for a while. We met with the property owner and the property owner's legal counsel. They've retained legal counsel. We are still trying to pursue a voluntary compliance agreement, and as part of that, and when I say city staff, Matt, you might have been the only one that didn't get to go, right?
Debbie didn't go either.
Debbie did not go, that's right. Amanda was there on the planning side. The property owner has retained design professionals, architects to help design some of the things that need to occur in order for code. There's several different code violations in place there. I'd hope to have the start of a negotiated voluntary compliance agreement with the property owner. I did not get that back in time today, but legal counsel on the other side is working on that. The city has exercised a great amount of patience on this particular property. And again, it's in the effort of trying to bring it into voluntary compliance as opposed to asking for litigation and dropping the hammer. We'll continue to exercise patience until it seems like we can't do that anymore. We were close last year. I will say the retention of legal counsel by the property owner was helpful because their attorney's been able to kind of explain to them, well, this is what the city code says and requires. Like it or not, this is what the city code requires for everybody within this zone to do. So it's the proverbial baby steps, but we're working on it. Patience is a virtue. So, okay, sorry.
Any other questions on code enforcement? All right, Mr. Shiwi, facilities.
So, ABC Consulting Arborists wrapped up all their work on the DNR grant that we had going on. They trimmed up all 81 trees that we have on our public properties. In the next couple of weeks, I'll start the final reimbursement report and send it off to DNR so we can get our reimbursement check for that and file that one away. We have all our equipment outfitted and ready for snow removal if we ever get any. We've done de-icing twice this year so far, so I mean, I think we're helping that budget anyway a little bit. I also spent some time over the holidays installing 2 new amber strobe lights on the leaf vac and the new pull-behind compressor. Because the leaf vac had 1 strobe light on the very back, which was great for people behind you, but nobody on the side traffic and anything. There was nothing. So now we have one on top that gets you a 360-degree rotation, and the same with the air compressor, which I figured would be beneficial. When we're down on Dalton in the middle of the road blowing out sprinkler systems and or blowing out cracks when we're doing crack sealing, and practically stopped while people are going by us. So just a little added safety there. The guys are doing typical winter maintenance stuff on the equipment on the rainy days, and when we had nice days like today, they're out doing some final leaf cleanup in some of our public areas. We've also had a few street signs go down over the last couple months, so we've been rebuilding and reinstalling those. And Matt and I went out last week and played a game of Frogger and put in 7 new candlesticks on the concrete medians on Argonne at Trent and the 2 turn left or left turn pockets going on to Buckeye. Because those things, if we do get any snow, you get a couple inches of snow, it's kind of hard to figure out where those are to navigate and stuff, and don't want people hitting those things. And the last thing I have is I have kind of an update on our Empire traffic calming stuff. And I don't think my presentation is going to hold a candle to your guys' water stuff, but I'll do my best to stumble through it. So, as we've been talking over the last decade or whatever about Empire traffic calming, we came to the agreement that we were going to start small and see how it works and go up from there as far as cost and implementing these things. So we talked about the chip seal and the re-striping to get our lanes narrower, adding the additional bike lane to the south side of the road to increase pedestrian area and safety and stuff. And there is traffic studies that state that narrowing lanes make you feel a little more closed in and has an effect on lowering traffic speeds. So we agreed to that, got the TIB funding, everything, chip seal and everything's in the works, and the restriping and narrowing lanes in the works. Now, there is an issue right here that was brought to my attention where if our south side bike lane's coming down, we have a right-of-way issue, kind of where that Union Pacific spur goes into IEP's property, where we don't own this land over in here. And so we can't really do anything additional in there. So what we have to do is we have to take and put a crosswalk in prior to that right-of-way issue and cross the southbound bike lane into the northbound bike lane. And the engineers and I came up with the idea of doing the crosswalk kind of in between a double speed hump. And they have kind of right here, it would be about in the middle of the Arboretum, kind of where the Mayor Batson's sign is, right about in the middle of the property, of doing one of 2 things. We could either do a double speed hump with a crosswalk in the middle of it, or we could do one up tabletop with a crosswalk on top and then back down in that position. And I think she has another slide that would kind of show the 2 different options there. They figured, and it makes sense. Next one, the one with all the cross sections on it. There you go. So, I mean, it makes sense from a safety standpoint not to just put a crosswalk right in the middle of the road when if you're going to have a speed hump type situation, you would want your crosswalk to be where theoretically your lowest speed of travel would be, so nobody gets ran over. So you have these 2 different diagrams here. This would be your double hump going up, down, and then a crosswalk in the middle of the 2, and then up and down again. That one, they projected to be about a $20,000 deal, but Matt reiterated to me that this isn't a real common practice around here. Nobody's really done it a whole lot. So he was just kind of throwing numbers out there. And I think honestly, if I could actually go talk to some asphalt companies, I think, I'd give them the dimensions, the specs, whatever, what we're trying to do, and get a more accurate number, which I feel would be less than that, but I don't, like I said, I don't know for sure. The other option was to do the single hump with the crosswalk on the elevated part of it. And you can see their design for this would be, so the total raise of it would be 4 inches in the center with 6 foot long ramps to gain that 4 inch of elevation raise from your natural road level up to the top of your hump or the top of your tabletop, whichever one you preferred. It was still going to be a 4 inch elevation gain to the top of the obstruction. So those are the two options there. And to implement the crosswalk, which would get us all our bike traffic over to the north side of the road, which we need to do because of the right-of-way issue. So if you go back to the map, Lisa, in between Boeing and Woodruff. So down here, so if we went ahead and did the double hump or the single tabletop hump with a crosswalk right there between Arboretum, as you keep coming up here between Boeing and Woodruff, you have a pretty long stretch there that people like to speed on as well. And that would be the next thing they were suggesting would be, and they don't have a double speed hump there, they just have a single hump. And I'm thinking part of the reason for this and some of the motivation behind it was put a double hump down here where there's no residential, If you Google double speed hump and you look at the one they did in California, obviously there's gonna be enough signing and striping and all kinds of warning ahead of time, but you're gonna get a person that's gonna fly over it and you don't obviously want them losing control and going into a house. So I think because this is a trial thing, they wanted to start by, for safety, putting it in a low residential area. The next one they're suggesting was to do like a single hump in this area. It would probably be less volatile for people speeding through there, but still make you aware. Now, those two things, in my opinion, which, doesn't really account for much, but those two things, I think we've been talking about this long enough. If you guys want to do some conglomeration of those two things, I'd like to do it before we chip seal and do it, at least the double speed hump by the Arboretum, at least that one before we chip seal. That way we're saving money on all the striping and the advanced warning and everything we need to do in the striping. But that's ultimately your guys' call. Now, as we increase in pricing and stuff, once we get farther into the neighborhoods and stuff, we got what they have as raised intersections, which we know we've done one at Fowler before, and that was a fail. These raised intersections are the same thing. 4 inch high elevation at the top of it with ramps up. Now, I think there's a couple different ways we can go with that, because in the past, the mayor talked about making each of those intersections a controlled intersection with stop signs. Now, obviously, if you're going to have those controlled with stop signs, you can make a way more abrupt raise, because theoretically you're coming to a stop, so you can hump up onto that raise. Where if they stay how they are now, then you're going to have to continue with that six foot ramp to get to the top and then 6 foot back down, which will still be quite a bit more significant than what we have at Fowler. You'll notice it. It just won't be horrible. Now, when we got into those, they kind of gave us a ballpark price for everything, which was the double speed hump, the hump there, and then raised intersections all the way through. And we're looking, at $225,000, which obviously isn't budgeted. We do have, I did check with Debbie today, and we do have about $80,000 budgeted. So if you guys wanted to pursue it, the $80,000 would cover our very minimal, I think it's $4,800 match for the TIB funding. And we could start doing some of these traffic things that we've been talking about forever. I would like to, just to see, You know, see what the residents' reactions are to them, see how we navigate them with plowing, see how it works with the, you know, the crazy speeds that we're seeing out there. Because like I've said before, I mean, we've personally have seen people flying by that radar sign out there at the end of Arboretum at 40, 45, 50 miles an hour. So, I mean, if you guys want to talk about it before the next meeting and come back to me and say we want to do something, let me know, and I'm all about it. I'll go to town on it, so.
Would this be something that he could do a first pass presentation next time that would be, or whatever?
So it sounds like I'm seeing a lot of head nods from the council, so what
Yeah.
we'll do is, Kyle suggested, and I think the next step for Kyle would be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, go out and meet with somebody from either like Spokane Rock or Inland or somebody like that and really talk about quantities and what you're doing and
I'd
get.
like to get some actual numbers that, you know, instead of just, because I mean, and I understand Matt's point, he doesn't know how to bid these because he's never done them before. But I mean, if I talk to an asphalt company man to man and say, hey, listen, this is what we want to do, you know, how much do you think it costs to get it done, even though maybe they haven't done one before either, at least we can get a better number.
Well, and I also think that some of the discussions that you and I had were, it would be good from the technical aspect with the asphalt company, to get some idea on, I think in Matt, if you look through there's a bid sheet in here that they put in, there's a bunch of saw cuts and stuff like that, that Kyle and I were discussing that we're not really sure how much these have to be keyed into the existing asphalt, how they will overlay, all that sort of stuff. So I think somebody from the provider could say, oh, you've got to grind off at least an inch or something like that before you can put this new asphalt on, or it doesn't matter, you just go out and put it in, or
No, I think so. Matt and I were talking about this yesterday. We had a little teams meeting to discuss this stuff, and I thought I had one, but he was saying do like a wedge grind where you start at about 2 inches deep and then taper out as you would be going up your incline. That way you have a good amount of new asphalt that would basically daylight out with your existing road, because obviously you can't feather out asphalt into nothing because it would delaminate in no time, you know. So they're talking like starting at a 2 inch grind and then tapering that out into daylight essentially as you're paving up.
So I think what Kyle can begin to do is work with the provider, the material provider, and with the engineers, and at the next meeting for your consideration, put together a potential cost estimate, or a cost estimate of what, based on that level of information, as to what that would look like. The good thing about this is that the other option is that if if council is interested in pursuing this, we could also add this type of element into the tip, which would then also make it available for REIT funding, et cetera. But it's got to be in the tip before we can do that, and the tip comes up in June, July. Yeah. So there is an opportunity to consider this for inclusion in the tip if we want to go that way too. So, but Kyle can get working on that, work with Matt, work with whatever providers he enjoys working with, and get something more formal put together for, I guess, bring it in as a first pass, first read for a estimate on what it would take.
Good. I'll get prices on both the double one and the tabletop one. And then that way you guys be thinking about which one you'd want to do after you do all of them. And
Can you get a quote on an intersection, the stop signs?
yeah, I can do that.
Anything else?
I think that was all I got.
All right, questions for Kyle on any of that? Thank you very much. Utilities, Mr. Erdall.
All the water samples came back good again this month. I renewed mine and Bryce's water certification. I don't know if you saw Rob's demolition tore down the buildings at 8911 and 8919 Euclid next to Kodiak. So we went over there, did an inspection on the water and sewer lines they cut and capped, and abandoned the old ones that went to those buildings. We had Prestige Pump Out doing the annual maintenance on New Park Well, and they replaced the leaky check valve up at Butler. And I've been in contact with Josh Villa from the county about what kind of grease trap Whistle Pump's gonna do a little food over there, so they need to have the right sewer stuff. Get all that figured out.
Any questions for Matt? Thank you. Planning, Ms. Tanya's report is in your packet. Just a few things. Wingstop TI's been approved. Whistle Pump, the kitchen, as Matt was discussing, she's worked on the coordination and review for the tenant improvements there. The certificate of occupancy was issued for the new Starbucks. And IEP is looking at a new blower bill. So if there's any questions on that, there is also in her packet the community survey results for the 2016, the community survey results presentation and the land capacity analysis report and presentation, which is included in there. And that was submitted to the county for a steering committee, and we will be presenting that to the county at the next steering committee of elected officials meeting later this month. Mr. Worst.
Nothing that's come before you or that I anticipate coming before you other than maybe code enforcement. Mayor and I had some discussions in December, and over the years, I guess looking at the years of those resolutions, but dating back to 2010 and last at 2013, the city's adopted some procurement processes, some resolutions for procurement that we have not updated. You don't engage in a lot of procurement. And then when we realize you want to rely on your statutes and they're outdated and they don't have the right dollar thresholds, they're not helpful. So we're gonna work on trying to refine and bring up to current standards some of your procurement processes and your resolutions, and really try to work more towards rosters if we can, whether it's through MRSC or maintain your own roster, or a little bit of both, just so you have options for services as opposed to we've got a $50,000 project and we've got to go out and solicit 3 bids and we can't wait. We got to wait 2 to 3 weeks to get bids back, and then we've got to wait another month and a half for the city council meeting. Roster processes will just allow for a much quicker action. So that'll be in the works over the next couple of months. Other than that, I think we're good. Glad you guys haven't had to move any snow. Hoping it continues that way. Just saying. I just jinxed you.
Any questions for Mr. Worst? So that brings us to the mayor's report. Happy 2025 to everyone. I'll say thank you. And I just, on a personal note, do want to remind everyone here that I will not be seeking office at the end for this year. This will be my last term in government and in all government. And so I look forward to completing this last year and setting things up for whoever should sit in this chair in 2026. To that end, you have, as for information, the mayor pro tem rotation schedule. For 2025, the first half is Mr. Culler, and for the second half is Ms. Vesey. I want to put Sean on notice that I will be out of the country for most of February. And so that means not only meetings, but I think you'll probably have to sign stuff and stuff like that. So a little more mayor than just the meeting gavel.
Than what I had to do.
You had a good rotation.
Yep.
A few things. I was glad Deputy Ball was able to show up. We're happy with that. We're working with county on getting our City of Millwood label on as a livery on the on his sheriff's vehicle. So we will work with him as he works his way into it and gets a little more. Was talking with Under Sheriff Kittle staff, and we'll have the opportunity to work with him and basically kind of guide those areas that we think from, or we know from our being here in the city, that we want extra patrol or extra emphasis on. I think right now he's just kind of learning the ways and the means of the city, and things like that. We spoke, or I spoke to council, I think it was sometime in November or December regarding Inland Empire Paper and the reevaluation of their taxable value and the potential implications for that. I am working with the county to have somebody from the county's assessor office present at the February meeting to give a presentation on that, kind of some understanding, and so I'll kind of coordinate as much as I can with what I want the county to bring to the city from the presentation to the citizens of kind of what, why, how, all that sort of stuff. Because I think it's important, again, I'll stress that the revenue, the amount of tax revenue does not change. The amount of revenue that's generated as part of the assessment doesn't change. It's tax shift. So IEP's assessed value goes down, and that loss of tax revenue is now distributed amongst the taxed districts. That would be us, that's the West Valley School District, that's Spokane Valley Fire District, etc. So the income that is slated for collection by those districts, that amounts are redistributed amongst all of us. So that revaluation will have not just an effect on Millwood, but on other folks around. So this is going to be a little more for, not just for us, for Millwood, but for people to get a better idea of kind of what's going on, because it is a significant reduction in taxable value. It's $50 million decrease of their taxable value. We are, we'll continue to work on data. We have a meeting with, on Springbrook and the accounting program, things like that. We have a meeting with the vendor next week to kind of discuss other options that or changes that can be made to our program or other potential programs that would allow us greater access to our data that's in the program there. The rest of this is, we're just gonna start putting in place some things for 2025 with trying to make sure we're getting our marks on procedure manuals, policy, updating procurement, things like that. It is the intent, and then finally, it is the intent of the engineers to release the bid package for the Argonne project, hopefully not this week, but next week. And then that will be out for bid and come back, and we will open those bids and see what we have. Questions?
Did you just say that the tax revenue doesn't go down?
The amount of tax they pay goes down. The amount of revenue to be collected by the amount of